And welcome back. Just thinking about the situation with sort of ignoring behavior, taking people at their word. It's how a lot of abuse exists. It's how abuse persists. It's this idea that, like, I've encountered people who will mock you and then say, "Oh, I'm just talking to my cat." Like, obvious bullshit like that, that they'll fight you to the death over almost, despite the fact that that's clearly not the case. And it's this sort of thing that you see on the schoolyard in high school and in public school, like very young ages, that some people never seem to grow out of. Just, that's not what I meant. That's not what I'm going to do. That's not what I've always done every time thus far, allowing you to extrapolate that I'll probably do it again. It's unfortunate because that's how you prevent growth. You allow people to hide and allow these issues to fester. All you're allowing is denying the truth of the situation. And unfortunately, it took me until I was pretty old to realize that enough to want to establish change in myself. So seeing it just all over the place still, especially in politics, is... Once you realize it's an issue, it's why I like watching Charlie on YouTube. He's very, very blunt and straightforward about things. He doesn't beat around the bush. He doesn't sugarcoat. He doesn't try to... He seems to want to see through a lot of the masking into the gooey center. And I honestly think that's really respectable. Like, even just looking at the war in Ukraine, a lot of the ways that Russian propaganda works, and just propaganda in general, all plays off this idea of manipulating meaning and manipulating outcome, and somehow people believing that if you're just it's like the con man definition in general, confidence man. This idea that if you exude a sufficient amount of confidence, that should somehow override reality. That's not how it should work. It's how it does work because of our own limitations as species, but that's not how it should ever work. Because at that point, I don't remember which princess it was, but thinking back to an abuse situation, I remember reading about this princess who had basically been gaslit until she ended up, from sticking up for herself, she ended up in a psych ward. And it's a situation that still occurs today. Like, that's a pretty old scenario. The whole concept of gaslighting, I don't know how far back the term goes. I don't know how long as a species we've been willing to admit that it exists. But it doesn't seem like, even with having the ability to label it, that a lot of people want to admit it exists still, so... But that's sort of the core of all of this. Gaslighting people. I live with one of the worst con men I've ever met in my life. Luckily, he's gone for a few months and everything has just gotten amazing. And it's astounding to me how much he hates me because I'll see through a lot of it. And I just don't care. I don't want that level of protection for myself, but that's the realization I had. It's literally people protecting themselves from their own bullshit by grouping together and convincing other people to do the same. If I agree to your bullshit and you agree to my bullshit, then we can live on Bullshit Mountain. I love that analogy from Jon Stewart. Like, if we all agree that bullshit is a sufficient building material, we can all build our entire society out of lies and just pretend that it is what it is. So... Oh, I didn't even... Oh, I get distracted so easily. I went to the temple a time and I forgot to do the scarecrow, because this is the room the scarecrow's in. I'll just do it after this temple. Uh-oh. Something there. Oh. I don't have any bombus. There we go. Unfortunately, too, I know this is a weirder take on things, but just this idea of agreeing on bullshit. I get the idea that conservatives genuinely think, just listening to how they rant about transgenderism, that they think that that's the scenario. We're all agreeing to bullshit when there's actual scientific and medical understandings behind it. So... listening to them talk and the things that they're afraid of, and it just, in general, the way that they group together and don't seem to be willing to tell the truth on anything. Then once in a while, if you actually follow them in their groups, you'll find out what they're actually thinking. And it's usually... I need to go get bombs. But it's usually... seemingly they're all protecting their own bullshit. They're all protecting themselves from their own lies, from understanding reality is a lot worse, a lot more complex, and a lot better in different ways than they believe. Like, I get why they'd be so terrified of sort of the communist and the socialism, and like in Russia we're technically dealing with conservatives who are terrified of capitalism. It's the reason you can basically exchange ideologies and you'll still have these conservative groups who are just terrified of whatever word you decide on. It's a South Park episode where they get rid of isms. Like, it's just a matter of protecting their own bullshit, and I think that's sort of the core of that episode too, to be perfectly honest, but unfortunately People are gonna defend to the death what helps them cope, what helps them understand the world, what helps them feel comfortable with the world. And I know whenever I've discussed why I'm transgender, it makes people uncomfortable. It's why I don't like discussing it, because people don't like having sex talks. People actually want to know, like... Oh my god. And the unfortunate thing is, you never know with people what's actually bullshit in their head and what isn't until you try and break everything down. I need hearts so badly. I don't know where to go. But at the end of the day, sexuality is always going to be more complex than what people want to feel comfortable with. And for others, just this simple thing. But when I hear a priest discussing about how if he was allowed to be gay, then he would be gay, that just makes me understand that he's gay. I don't know how else you'd read into that. Like, if I was allowed to be, then I would be. Like, I know a lot of straight guys who would never consider being gay. Because they're not. It's not a thought that goes through their head. They're not all of a sudden thinking, like, well, if I was allowed to be, then I would be. That isn't something they contemplate. It's not hard to understand, but anyway. Thanks for watching.